I don't know. Don't ask. I have no answers to explain my behavior. I mean it's a little colder for one. And yesterday I had my hood up for the thumbnail, so I was like, oh, I'll do it again today. Then I proceeded to take like 10 different thumbnail screenshots. It's fine. Today's ICC is 8687. And it's also, there's a special sponsor for today's ICC. Meaning it was a gift. I'm going to use the Osho Tarot. We're just going to see what's up. And yeah. I don't know. Oh. Yeah, sure, why not? I'm using. Did I end up using Oracle? Was that yesterday? I don't know. Anubis at the bottom of the deck. Excuse me. Which is interesting because we just saw Anubis in the Necromancer, SKT Revelations edition, right? Instead of just the scales of Anubis, we see Anubis with his scales. So I'm getting one of these. I'm going to pull a few cards. We'll see what's up for today, what the Oshos and Tarot has to say. And I feel like after this, I'll feel pretty complete. I feel like we've kind of been all over the board a little bit. And yeah. Oh, okay. Bottom of the deck is the Ageless, the Light in the Darkness. I don't know if I've ever seen this card before. I don't know if you'll see the card today. The Light in the Darkness, the Ageless. Healing, graciousness, and acceptance are the domains of the Ageless. Excuse me. It's 4:32 on the timer. We're counting down to something. Where did the card go? Hello? There's like not a million different places it could have went. Oh, it's right here. The Maestro. I know we've seen the Maestro before. Master of Inspiration. Master of Inspiration in the light and the darkness. The Maestro's domains are understanding, community, and ingenuity. Love this combination. The light of the darkness, Master of Inspiration. They look related. And it's kind of giving me the Angel of Ruin, but pre or post Ruin. The Angel of Ruin became the Angel of Ruin because he's an angel that people stopped seeking, in a way. Interesting. So between the Ageless Maestro, is it Maestro or Maestro? Because a Maestro is a teacher, a Maestro is a conductor. Past lives is at the top of the Osho Zen Tarot. The thing about the Maestro being a conductor, she's giving like a symphony orchestra conductor, but instead of that, it's like a material that conducts something else, right? Excuse me. So usually it's a conductor of like electricity, right? If we think of a conductor, but you can also conduct heat, right? Metals conduct heat because they allow heat to pass through them relatively effortlessly. Water is a conductor of electricity. Um, so there's an element of conductance with this maestro. I don't know, for some reason, the dream and fighting, for some reason, it's like we are conductors of energy, conditioning and fighting. Excuse me. Apparently, the coffee's not waking me up. I don't know. I feel like this tiredness almost just came over me out of nowhere. Oh, guidance immediately flipped out the three of rainbows, which is interesting because we've been seeing a lot of guidance lately. There was the priestess, guidance of dreams, the Queen of Wands in the African American tarot came out with an energy of guidance, and here's yet another with this three of rainbows. Oh, the angel. Angel. I was like, I feel like I was just talking. Angel of Ruin. That's who it was. I was like, I feel like I was just talking about one of the angels. And then there's this like angelic energy. Cool. This is so interesting. Hmm. It's interesting because with the maestro and guidance, it feels like there was the energy of the internal witness. So maybe it's along those lines because it's an energy of like someone's like, I'm going to do something first and then you do what I do, like guidance, right? But it feels internal. Like, so for example, the divine can be doing something through somebody. So maybe someone, the first time or the first few times they do something, they're kind of like divinely inspired or their intuition just sort of kicks in. And then they're expected is a strong word. Like that is the time of learning as the divine moves through or deeply inspires someone to do something. Then it's for them to sort of like be able to replicate it within themselves later. But that's why it's like it's so like it feels like a weird thing to read. You know what I mean? Because usually it's someone beside you or outside of you, like training you and coaching you through something. But this feels like the divine inside of someone. And again, like maybe, excuse me, should we read the maestro? Sure, let's read the maestro on the age list before we get too far. The keeper of whispers, the ageless, the light in the darkness, denied paradise on a matter of law, in spite of her noble life and spirit, the court of Elohim, in their mercy, granted the ageless the power of renewal for herself and others. This is so interesting because we saw law yesterday. Hi. I'm back. So apparently, I forgot to plug up my laptop and it died. Sorry. Yeah, it just like went black. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Forgot to plug up the laptop. Okay, so I'm not sure how long this is going to take. It says my connection is excellent. For a hot minute, they allowed me to resume a stream outside of like third party software, but I can't figure it out now. So maybe it's still in there, but anyway. So there's going to be a little delay again, but that's fine. Um, so yeah, I guess I'll start all over. What's interesting is though, I think I was mentioning how yesterday in the card of justice we saw three. First of all, there was a mention of the like judge of man and then the divine judge, and then there were three divine judges. They were the Orisha of Shango. I don't remember. I remember Shango, and I want to say it's fine. We saw him yesterday, right? And there was one of severity, one of justifiable action, and then one of sort of like consequence, right? One for which they're like it's absolute cut and dry, right and wrong. I think one that involved consequence, but some consideration, and one that could excuse if enough consideration were to be sort of given. And it's interesting, maybe, how, because I feel like a lot of the focus had been on how the court of the divine differs from the court of man. But I was thinking about it earlier today about how sometimes maybe we try to apply the like earthly legality to spiritual affairs, meaning it's very easy to in an earthly way be like, well, this isn't illegal, or this is a loophole, or technically I'm not doing anything wrong, so, and to try to apply the same sentiment to the spiritual affairs where those same arguments don't necessarily hold. Anyway, it's interesting that we see it here in the ageless. I'll start from the beginning. The ageless light, the light in the darkness, denied paradise on a matter of law, in spite of her noble life and spirit. The court of Elohim, in their mercy, granted the ageless the power of renewal for herself and others. Also, this power of renewal for herself, it gives the energy of you. And I don't remember the context that. I feel like I'm like so close. I don't remember the context that you came out in the um, first draft of the runes Lafruma. I remember you was there because I remember talking about how the ash trees were standing dead. But you was there as some kind of renewal that started from within. This allows her to grant healing and succor to those souls suffering from harms inflicted by Abaddon's corruption. She has accepted her lot with graciousness and dignity, preferring a life of service and acceptance of her fate to one of bitterness and despair. Seek the ageless when in need of healing, a sympathetic ear, or the grace to accept what one cannot change. So instead of giving herself over to a fate, or instead of sort of giving herself over to fate in a way of bitterness and despair, she chose to accept a life of service. And it's almost very done. Is this a different what? The maestro is in a different realm. I just assumed they were in the same realm. And I feel like the fact that the maestro is in a different realm but they look so related almost plays into the parallels and what was the other word? Because the first energy that came out, there was like two manifestations of the same thing in two different places. Analogs. It almost plays into that like analogs and parallels. Mm, that's weird. Okay, let me find this maestro. I don't. Why am I struggling to to get through this book? I was like, why am I struggling? Just like shuffling pages. Okay, there we go. Now we're moving. Poet of Avon, or Poet of Avon. The Maestro. Here we go. So the Maestro is in the realm of the Republic of Pandemonium. Holds the Maestro. The city of Pandemonium and its surrounding lands belong not to the gods, but to the archons of human achievement. These icons bound themselves in life not to gods or faiths, but to human ideals, becoming idols and objects of veneration in their own way. To dwell in pandemonium is to still be bound by the temporal goals and abilities of a human life, whether the glory of success or the haunting specter of failure. And the ageless is in the realm of soul, and probably butchering that, which, like Irkala, the realm of Shoal is concerned with bright and dark dualities, where Irkala focuses on the emotional experience. However, Shoal centers the extremes of human sin and holiness. To dwell in Shoal is to submit to the judgment of the Absolute, to suffer between the difficult requirements of grace and the easy torments of corruption, and to have the courage to discover where you fall in your overall contribution of good to the world or evil. And it's almost bringing to mind the final cards, I believe, from the Tarot Nefertari. With like it was the world situated between Newt in the sky and Geb below, and then there was also the other card, and there was like this circle. There was like this orb around the person that was different than sort of like the world at large. Like their aura marked some kind of boundary in a way. Bright and dark dualities, the axis of good and evil, submission to the judgment of the absolute. But well, yeah. And then on the other side, with the Republic of Pandemonium, it's not ruled by gods or faiths, but by human ideals. So even these two realms almost play out the court of man versus divine law. Right? The court of man would be the Republic of Pandemonium, whose representative is the Maestro. Divine law, the realm of Shoal, whose representative is the Ageless. Anyway, so the Maestro, master of inspiration, At the nexus of ability, creativity, sharing of knowledge, innovation, and revelation, there stands the maestro. In him, all disciplines are understood and shared. The perfect realization of the man that was, the man that is in the afterlife, and what humanity could be. The maestro instructs us in what lies next when we have done it all, to look for the next opportunity, to form connections and communities to share what we have learned, or to pick up a new discipline. He represents mastery in at least one field and warns us not to grow stagnant or complacent in our understanding, lest it grow stale. Again, his domains are understanding, community, and ingenuity. Now, the theme of community has come up. I don't know if this is like. Sorry. I'm like. I keep having to like cut it with water. I don't know. I don't know if it's like too syrupy. I feel like usually it's not an issue. I've been getting them a lot more, so it's like becoming an issue, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so this kind of sort of is this our Bodhisattvic Elysian Enochian energy? We did see. So first we saw the Seven of Realms, which is the beginning of the understandings. It's seeing, beginning to see the spiritual and the intangible that moves before the physical, right? Beginning to understand that there's more to the world than meets the eye. The eight that we saw in the journeyman yesterday, and the journeyman came, I'm pretty sure we saw it in the Revelations edition. It was in full color. Yeah, we saw it in the Revelations edition, so it was pre-Aquarius season. It's the deck that was designated pre-Aquarius season. It was at the bottom of the deck. Um, we saw that, and that was like the apprentice becoming an adept in their own way, with the message of it's important to not pass certain things off because that those are going to be key to going beyond adept and becoming a master. The maestro is the master. And so it's like I look at these four lights and it's giving the elements earth, wind, air, and fire. The four elements, but they're all light. So they've been stripped of their elemental properties, right? And so that gives the energy of quantum C. Was that the Six of Swords in the Quantum Tarot 2.0? And how, like, there were Einstein's theories that gave us how the world worked on an atomic level, but our knowledge eventually came to a point where we got we were made aware of like subatomic particles. And when it came to the subatomic particles, a lot of stuff seemed to contradict itself because of how it's like things operate as a whole differently than they operate as individual pieces, right? For example, an H2O molecule behaves very differently than either hydrogen or oxygen, sort of purely, right? If you drink pure oxygen or if you drink pure hydrogen, she's not going to hydrate you like some good old H2O. Right? For example, because the whole has different the whole is different than its parts. Now, what, years ago now, there was the capital I versus the EYE that dealt with this. And it started as like seeing each element as a function of the other elements that would allow us to get to a place to almost like understand. And again, with the understanding, with the information, with the guidance provided, guidance provided by Quantum U, it helps us understand raw ethereal energy before it's aspected into an element, but we also have to keep in mind that it's different than that aspected energy as an element, right? So let's say, for example, um, in the aspects of the divine that were like patrons that were adopting new. Who was the person with the patron? Excuse me, with that energy. It's kind of like I don't know. It's like there's some aspect of the divine that we know, and there are other like the divine is much larger than what we believe and what we know and what we know of the divine. It is wholly incomprehensible, and it's almost like when a relationship deepens or when it transitions, kind of sort of playing off of the baggage of yesterday. It's like if we continue to hold the same expectations, then maybe it'll seem like the divine starts to contradict itself or whatever. And that's because we're not allowing it to be sort of what it is. Again, like subatomic particles operate differently than they do as their atomic wholes. And since this is a proto energy, you could say that the divine has had to show up in a lot of different ways for the past who knows how long because of what has transpired on earth, because of what we seek from the divine, and because of what we seek because of what has transpired. So, for example, if there's someone in your life who, let's say, you are looking to learn how to cook, and there's someone in your life who's a master chef, but you also, need a tailor, and you only ever go to that person for clothes, to the point where like you already have the perfect person to teach you how to cook because not only are they this expert, um, oh, what's the word? Haberdasher? Is that the word? Is a haberdashery a place where you go and get clothes? I don't know. Not only are they an expert tailor, they're also like a master chef. But it's like we never get to see them as a chef because we always go to them to mend a garment or to create a new one or to do whatever. It's like that's the role that the person has fallen into, but that's not all of who they are. And that also isn't necessarily like what they're primarily known for or what they're the best at. Now, this is where I go. Okay, so are these four balls of light to illustrate, to provide the illustration of that like proto elemental energy or that pre aspected energy? It's almost like a yes and no because there's still four of them. And when it comes to an aspect, like when it comes to raw energy, right? For example, you got like all of these different types of cells. In a stem cell, a pluripotent stem cell can be like, it can differentiate into any kind of cell. So you wouldn't need multiple pluripotent stem cells because it can differentiate into anything. But it feels like it's still important that they're all represented here, not only to provide the inspiration to reach the conclusion of it's that pre-aspected elemental, that pre-elementally aspected energy. It's like raw ether. And also, the magician was a big part yesterday. So, this, in a way, goes beyond mastery. Because the magician is a master magician if they can use those four elements, right? If they can assemble the atoms, if they can, assemble protons and neutrons and electrons to create atoms and then arrange those atoms in ways to create molecules and blah, 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 whatever, like that's a master magician. You don't have to go to the subatomic level to be a master magician. Again, so something in this maestro goes beyond mastery. And even with guidance, it's like it's leaving all of the colors behind and heading in the direction of that like pure white light. Take it as it resonates. If it resonates, if it don't resonate, don't take it. What does this mean, girl? I don't know. I just read it. My brain operates in metaphor. It does. It's the truth. My Mercury is in Pisces in my 12th house retrograde. So a lot of people like to be like, oh, it's not that deep. It's not that deep. But then sometimes some people be like, oh, Patrick, like, you're so smart, blah, 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 whatever. And it's like, yeah, because it, like, you can see how these things sort of connect. But I don't rely on similarities so much that I don't allow for things to show me what they are or how they're different or why it's not an exact one for one type thing. You know what I mean? I try to at the very least. It's how I learn, and it's been helpful. To the point again, it's like there have been times I've come upon completely new information, but you can tell like with the words that people use to give names to things, that in and of itself a lot of times reveals so much about like the property or whatever, right? If it's electromagnetic, and if I say, hey, like here's an electromagnetic property, and you don't know anything about electromagnetic properties, electricity, magnetism, you can infer it has something to do with the flow of electrons and a resultant magnetic field. You can put the pieces together. You know what? Anyway, it's fine. I don't know why, but it feels like it's important. And again, it's like you could say the divine is there for us more than just to give us money and a new house and a new car and a new job and like the love of our life and stuff like that. Like there's so much more. So much more than a human typically needs because that's pretty much the extent of our desire a lot of times. But it's available. Cool. I want to read the Maestro again. I'm going to read the Maestro and then I'm going to read the Ageless. At the nexus of ability, creativity, sharing of knowledge, innovation, and revelation, there stands the Maestro. In him, all disciplines are understood and shared. The perfect realization of the man that was, the man that is in the afterlife, and what humanity could be. The Maestro instructs us in what lies next when we have done it all, to look for the next opportunity, to form connections and communities to share what we have learned, or to pick up a new discipline. He represents mastery in at least one field and warns us not to grow stagnant or complacent in our understanding, lest it grow stale. Denied paradise on a matter of law, in spite of her noble life and spirit, the court of Elohim in their mercy granted the ageless the power of renewal for herself and others. This allows her to grant healing and succor to those souls suffering from harms inflicted by Abaddon's corruption. She has accepted her lot with graciousness and dignity, preferring a life of service and acceptance of her fate to one of bitterness and despair. Seek the ageless when in need of healing, a sympathetic ear, or the grace to accept what one cannot change. There was something in that Maestro. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was also the abandoned. palace type energy with the Mason and um, the Eight of Cups, the Defector, with the Mason and the Defector. Like that throne, that seat is already there. Also, because of the her, the entry for the Maestro is clearly she's giving feminine energy, and because of the her here, there's guidance and healing. What is interesting though is because even yesterday it was that energy of like there are no guides to Eden, only guardians. But we also saw on the other side of that lovers, on one side was the abandoned palace type energy with the Mason and the Defector. On the other side, it was the Emperor and that Page of Cups, Herald of the Purifying, and Master of Intellections. But there was the Scorpion on the Page of Cups, meaning like after a transition is completed, then that letter, then that information sort of comes in. So just because there's no guide to the place doesn't mean that there isn't instruction when you find it. Or not, there won't be something. Also, what I love here is that, like, mastery is only the beginning. If you are so comfortable in your mastery that you never grow, you'll go stale. Politics and slowing down at the cut. Politics slowing down, interesting. Seven of Air. And the Knight of Rainbows, maybe. If that's the Knight of Rainbows, that's interesting because we did see the Shining Quarry. The Shining Quarry was behind New World Order, Caverns of the Gnome. I don't know if that's the page or the knight. Okay. I didn't read guidance, but I'm not going to either. Look at this. You see this? It didn't flip. It didn't fully fall. And I... Oh! Okay, well, it's flipped over now. It flipped over and all those cards just went on the floor. What's interesting is, guess what the card is? So as I was talking about the abandoned palace and the purified mind, they came out. Their significator was the lovers. The lovers is that card. Interestingly enough, that was just like sitting there. It didn't flip and it didn't fully fall, but it was positioned in a way in the shuffle that it didn't automatically do whatever. And as I tried to not illustrate the point, the cards just fell on the floor and that card flipped over. How many cards is this? It's not too many. Oh, here's another one. Okay. Cool. Cards on the floor today. Love it. The Maestro was on the floor. And this Maestro energy is interesting with Olodumare because it all kind of started with Olodumare, but Olodumare is so transcendent that speechless. And I feel like it's almost like the truth of the divine is kind of descending in a way that supersedes all of what we need the divine to be, all of what we think the divine to be, and all of what the divine has had to be. But again, that was the shattered mirror of the Ace of Swords that we saw yesterday. But it makes me think too when I had first gotten the story engine. friendliness, two of water. We see the merging of those two. Oh, and the lovers, yeah. And the lovers, we see them face to face. In friendliness, we see them merging across that distance. We have four more cards that fell out. Stress, the seven of fire. This seven of fire is interesting because the monkey is supposed to be the one doing the trick. But the monkey now holds the pin to pop the balloon. Like, still holding on to the leash of the monkey. Then we have trust, which is the Knight of Cups question mark. The Knight of Cups was the last card before the title card in the Tarot Nefertari. It was the Three of Cups, the Chariot, the Knight of Cups, and then the title card. Here it's trust. Trust and the Fool. It's like trust has intentionally taken that leap. Trust could be flying, actually. We don't know. But it feels like the Fool has accidentally stepped off of the cliff. Like the Fool wasn't paying attention, whereas trust reads as something that's done more deliberate. Feels like it doesn't matter, honestly. The only difference is the Fool's reaction when they realize they're falling, or when they realize they're in free fall, then they're gonna have to, like, they may have that moment of initial panic before they give over to trust because you're already falling at that point. You know what I mean? And it almost gives the energy of the ageless, right? Rather than giving herself over to despair, she's accepted her fate and chosen a life of service. More so than accepting her fate than giving herself over to despair. And then last but not least is the 10 of the mind, which is rebirth, right? From the camel to the lion to whatever this person was being guided to. It's that transcendent, that's the Bodhisattva Elijah, or Bodhisattva Enoch, Sandalphon, right, type energy. It started with stress and it ended with rebirth. Bottom of the deck is change. And this is so funny. It almost reads as a merging of the wheel that we saw in the Ace of Swords and the Warrior. In the Vitruvian edition, the sepia tone deck, with the wheel that we saw in the Wheel of Life. That was more almost like, so in the Warrior and the Ace of Swords, it was more solar. In the sepia tone deck, in the Revelations edition, which has color, it was more like lunar toned. And it's because we see the petals on the outside with that more circular round wheel on the inside. And it's again, it's almost because that solar wheel and lunar wheel are coinciding that now there's this greater words sometimes. And that's the change. Right. So when it's purely logical or things that we can see, you could say that's more so navigating the court of man. when it's purely spiritual and discerned by the intuition, you could say that's in the realm of divine law. And we live in a world where there's duality. We live in a world of both. That's to see them both, to operate in them both. And again, there's something in this stress card that it almost does read like if we are fully in one, we will be tried by the other, right? So the purely spiritual, the purely subtly minded will be challenged by the physical, the natural, and the progression and procession. The purely logical and mundane will be challenged by the underlying, right? The underlying could be something as simple as like history or the untold truths of history, how history has sort of been intentionally whatever. Or it could be sort of sentiments that are navigating, or sentiments that are heavy, or gaining, like amassing, reaching critical mass um, before they come in and produce this all of a sudden out of the blue super dramatic and drastic shift. But it's like if you've been paying attention, the signs have been there the whole time, right? This It's like if you were aware, it's not all of a sudden, it's overdue. It's one of those where it's like it's not out of the blue, it's actually overdue. To be entirely of one will be to be challenged by the other, and that's the stress. And it's almost like to illustrate a point. It is, but it isn't. It's not necessarily intentionally to illustrate a point, but the fact that it happens itself illustrates a point. But because it's like it's known that it will illustrate a point, and you like play into it's played into that it illustrates the point, but the purpose in and of itself is not to illustrate a point. The purpose is to accomplish something, and in that thing being accomplished, it will illustrate a point, and it's beneficial for that point to be illustrated. So like you play into the point being illustrated, but illustrating a point is not the purpose. And actually this rebirth is interesting because in that same deck where um was it under the Page of Swords, or was it on the Page of Swords? No, because the Strength card was there in the Tarot Nefertari, where we had the Three of Cups, the Chariot, and the Knight of Cups all heading for that title card. We saw the Strength card, and like the Strength card, she was like doing a checkup on the lion. Now we see this rebirth, this evolution from the lion to this next phase and this next stage. But again, like that was the whole point. Like it'll be a testament of strength. Like you have already proven that you're strong enough. And the fact that it's a testament to one's strength may inspire others to be stronger. But it's like these secondary things that are also highly beneficial. It's not necessarily the point. I don't know. I feel like I've communicated it. I feel like I haven't. I feel like I haven't. And I feel like it's kind of a level of detail that's not necessarily extremely important for the majority of most of anyone. But it feels like it's only important because it feels like there may be someone who, it's like when your primary purpose, if someone's primary purpose in doing something is to make a point, then that's when we can easily almost like do too much. right? Or it's like we try to make an example out of someone, but then it can backfire because like the whole point is to make an example. The point isn't to be like progressive or just progressive in terms of like moving things forward and moving things along. If the point is to make a point of someone, then it's like it becomes more about ridiculing and it becomes more about all of this other stuff. Like the point will be made. Like we don't have to, depending on the situation, because again, and that plays into the whole like you don't have to go and flex on your haters and you don't have to like distract from what you're doing and how you're moving forward by proving yourself to everyone who like ever doubted you or whatever. You can, but also if you continue to do what you're doing, like that in and of itself is enough of a flex. That in and of itself will prove more so than anything that you could prove yourself. Like that's also a part of justice. It's covered in your justice package and your justice plan. That's covered. And it can be conducted and carried out in a way that actually inspires whoever to be better, to do better, that further increases the growth rather than you. It's almost like if someone's garden begins to thrive and then they go around and start spraying like herbicide on all of these other gardens. It stifles and it stagnates. And again, like we, with our limited sight and vision, don't know how things are to fully play out. That could end up hurting us, or it can end up queuing us up for a fall, right? So, for example, like let's say that someone gets, for who they are, because of who they are chosen to be a representative or whatever for whatever thing. And that's their big break. And then let's say they go on their hater tour, right? And it's like they go and they start talking all whatever. But then, like the person that partnered with them, after they see that, it's like that's not the type of person that, like, that behavior is not in alignment with what we're about. And, like, I didn't think that because of everything else that I saw, that this is what I would be getting. But now that I've seen this side, it's caused us to have doubts and questions. And that's, again, something completely unnecessary that then comes back to work against us, which is why we saw with the Ivory Shield yesterday. If we need to do that, give it to the Ivory Shield, give it to the Divine, and allow the Divine to sort of like handle, hold, and transmute that. It's not worth taking yourself out of whatever you are moving towards. But, you know, we're human. So, yeah. Like, I saw something, some thumbnail or some mention of like a revenge body a few days ago. And it's like the thing about a revenge body, just again, sort of in terms of like when you say something and the name of a thing itself is pretty revealing. If something is a revenge body, if something only comes to be because of an ending or because of a separation, then that person would have never gotten that. And it's funny because I just saw a reel that was sort of like the other side of that coin, right? It was like someone that continued to give someone else chance after chance after chance. And they were like, why do sometimes people wait until it's too late to try to change or to try to be better? And it's because the person didn't think that they ever had to. The person thought that they would have had another chance and another chance and another chance. It's the same thing. If we had stayed in that situation, nothing would have changed. And again, the whole concept of a revenge body is like, oh, look at what you gave up, look at what, like, whatever. But again, it's like they never would have had that. So it's like either way, that would never have been theirs. But they continue to live rent free in your head. They continue to have control over your life because now you're doing this to spite them. And if they remain unaffected, now your confidence that should have been boosted by your improved physique or whatever is crushed even more because now with your banging revenge bot, they still don't want you. So what was it all for? Right? But Again, it's like we could avoid all of those pitfalls by just focusing on what we are inspired and guided to focus on. Not necessarily going to be easy, but it isn't necessarily anything to stress over either. And maybe that's the point, or another point to make too. Like, there has been a lot of emphasis on like allowing ourselves to be challenged and learning to do the things, but like we're still gonna have help. Like, both of these cards mention community or the world outside of oneself, right? The ageless restores, regenerates, rejuvenates herself and others. And the maestro is all about the sharing of knowledge and community. There are networks of masters. Like, no one has to do it all. I'm also reminded of when the lunar eclipse rune came out, which was it the lunar eclipse rune? I know we saw Stitch, Needle. There was like the merge bee where they're coming together. Again, we see it in friendliness. Where they're coming together. And it's because they come together, both the camel and the lion, that that new thing is born. And like, trust in the fool, it's not necessarily an either or thing. Sometimes maybe we're in free fall, sometimes maybe we're in trust. As long as we're still falling, we're fine. But what I also like about the imagery of falling in the fool is we saw that in Gare, right? That was the ripened fruit that drops to the earth, and with the ascendance or ascension or whatever, it keeps plucking these unripened fruits. And what that does is it kills the bloodline of the tree. It can't drop seeds and proliferate because the unripened fruits are plucked and then, of course, discarded. Whereas if it were to fully ripen, then it can go through its, right. It was eaten by the bear and then pooped out 3 miles away. This seed was carried by the river 20 miles away. This one was carried on the wind. This one was like, you know what I mean? On earth as it is in heaven, which isn't too necessary. And now that I look at this stress, at first, it wasn't malicious. It's the energy that also came out, I think, yesterday, of the breaking point, right? The point where it's low enough, because again, it can always get lower, it can always get worse. It's the point where we decide, like, this is the point from which we rise. And there's all of these like tricks and all this other stuff to try to keep oneself afloat, but the point is to fall and then rise reborn type energy. Cool. I do want to read this Lovers because I feel like there's some, well, I don't know, something in the image that, I mean, I guess, low hanging fruit. This is the spiritual self, and this is the, like, the higher self and the lower self. This is the ego and the, it's like the flesh and the soul, flesh and the spirit. Again, merging to create a whole self, quantum you. We saw that in quantum you, and also I'm pretty sure in the whispers of Lord Ganesha, to accept oneself fully. Whereas again, we're either land bound, so concerned with our material 3D lives, or plucked before we're ripe with that whole, right? Rather than being whole. It's almost, yeah, it's fine. And that would be the change. That was the change. It inspires the change. When someone is both the solar and the lunar wheel, which unlocks that deeper level. I love that. Because now we have yin yang on the inside of that triangle where we saw the tria prima before. Yesterday it was the tria prima in that lunar wheel. It was sulfur, salt, and water. Which again, it's like they've become unaspected. Water is the element of transcendence in that tria prima. They've all become transcendent, all four of them. And it happens as the solar wheel and the lunar wheel align. Um, cool. I think that is enough. Those are the nights, by the way. The night of water and the night of rainbows. We saw the shining quarry behind New World Order. Night of Rainbows, I already forget what the Night of Rainbows was. And then again, the Knight of Cups was the last card before that Great Void. Oh, we saw in the Mystical Shaman Oracle cards, in the final cards, there was the Mystical Shaman and the Beloved. The Mystical Shaman was the one that had the internal witness. Here is the heart of that Beloved. I mean, it was the beauty way, but the beauty way blossoms from this heart of the Beloved, where they are embracing rather than. It's like at the heart they're embracing, but as it plays out, they're like standing face to face in opposition. It's like both of them believe there can only be one type of energy, right? The spirit must subjugate the physical versus like what you see is what you get. The subtle is inconsequential or insubstantial, right? And it's a play of both. Anyway, cool. So, I have to go to the restroom. This feels pretty complete. Yeah. What does it mean? I don't know. At some, because of that stress, at some point, it is like a rebellion against the divine. Because the divine is trying to ground. It can play out multiple ways, right? That's not the first way I read it. But that's also the thing about sort of mysterious ways. Things can serve multiple purposes, but sometimes our primary ambition is what really sets the tone for the thing. Right. That's like, hey, here's something that's good for the environment, and it's also, this, and it also does this, and it also does these other things. Right. Someone's primary purpose may be like one of these other things, but good for the environment is enough to co-sign of like, yeah, okay, let's boost it type of energy, right? I mean, it can work multiple ways, but that is how sometimes we work to our own undoing. All right. I almost don't want to get a final one of these, but I will. Was that the... No, I see Lilith, Thief of Life. Lilith, Thief of Life is an interesting energy. Because it immediately what came to mind is comparison is the thief of joy. And it's almost like the energy that the peacock and the wild unknown animal spirits can hold, where people compare themselves to the peacock. Like, I've called it an inverted mirror before. Like, the peacock is so beautiful that it naturally draws out the insecurities of others and causes them to unconsciously project their insecurities onto the peacock. Right? Like, in reality, Peacock is minding its own business, maybe not even concerned about how gorgeous it is. Peacock is like thinking, what am I going to eat for dinner today? And then someone on the outside see this gorgeous, beautiful Peacock energy, triggers their insecurities, like, oh, look at Peacock over there. Like, looking down at everybody. Oh, they think they're so gorgeous and so beautiful. Oh, like, they do this and they do that to put on this air of whatever, because it's like this is everything that the person is working through in their own mind, projecting onto the peacock. And it's, again, it's sort of like that 20% of the thing that's the mirror from the Ace of Swords yesterday. And it's not necessarily that energy. Like, Lilith is the thief of life because people set her, and the metaphor that's playing out here specifically with comparison being the thief of joy, it's like people compare themselves to Lilith. But Lilith is just out here doing Lilith stuff, right? And now she's the thief of life because she did this and she did that and she did all this other stuff and blah, 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 whatever. But meanwhile, it's like, okay, but what about the choices and decisions that you are making in your own life right now? Type energy, right? Lilith didn't get you to need... Anyway, it's fine. It's like that inverse mirror. It's the mirror that we just can't help but project onto because it can trigger so much insecurity within ourselves. And I've known like several people like that in my life who literally it's like they'll just exist and they'll be minding their own business, and there'll be so many people that don't like them that project all of this stuff onto that person, like, oh, they think they're so much better than everybody else, or oh, they think they're so beautiful, or oh, they think they're so good, or oh, they think they're so whatever. Meanwhile, like, if you actually knew this person, you would know that not only are there things that they're also going through within themselves, but you would also know that like they don't think that at all. Type energy. Anyway, comparison is the thief, and it's the comparison that they inspire within you, or the comparison that they can inspire within others. So maybe if someone is that peacock energy, it's like, don't take it on. If you know that you're not the type of person to think something or operate or believe something in a certain type of way, that's for other people to work out within themselves. It is not for you to dull or dim or do whatever. That's not your responsibility. And especially if like the rebirth and the merging and whatever you're moving forward with, it's like it's not to take away from that. Some have to shine through sheer nature of their purpose or their work, right? If you're a change maker, or if what you do completely shifts an industry, a standard of living, or whatever, like, you're naturally going to get a lot of attention and going to encounter opposition that's more so fear of change or whatever. It's not even necessarily about you particularly, type of energy. But if you were to allow that to cause you to dim, then it takes away from what's, to be done. Type energy. All right, cool. Who was that? Who flipped over? Charon, the ferryman. Necessity, focus, and transition. It is a necessity that you focus on your transition. because you do it for more than just you. Just like the ageless, who is that healing for herself and others, just like the maestro who creates a community of shared knowledge. Right. And Peacock isn't always that to me, but honestly, oftentimes it is. And that's one of the traps of honestly, and but it's like you can see it when you're outside of it. It's of course it's easier to see, but you can see it. Like that's one of the traps of self-awareness. That especially one of the traps of thinking or believing that you are the only person on this planet or the only person that you interact and engage with that is on a journey of healing and becoming self-aware. Now everyone is projecting onto you and all of this and all of this and all of that to the point where we don't see that we're projecting onto other people or we're projecting on other energies or we because of our own resistance to face ourselves we're encountering a mirror, but we think we're so perfect and above it all and we're the mirror that triggers other people and whatever, but it's like girl, but I'm not the one triggered, you're triggered. You're projecting your trigger onto me, meanwhile I'm living my life minding my business. And if I'm you catch me over here preening, it's because like I don't know, there's a bug that's in my feathers. Am I supposed to just leave it? It's an irritant. Like if you had a bug on you, you would swat it off too. Type of energy. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's not me in particular. The Traveler and Erishkigal, Queen of Shadows and Keeper of the Crossroads. Keeper of the Crossroads and Queen of Shadows gives me the energy of Karnak, the Keeper of Karnak, which is a light that's so bright it naturally inspires shadow. It's so bright it casts shadows. And if someone hasn't dealt with that within themselves, or if someone isn't ready to deal with that or see that in themselves, naturally what they're going to do is they're going to project it onto the source of light. Look at that light creating the shadow. And it's like, girl, it's. So what, we're going to demonize the sun now? We're going to. I was going to say we're going to demonize truth. And we blame the sun for shadows that already exist. It just illuminates it. And you would think that it's fine. No, say what you gotta say. Say what you gotta say. No, it's fine. I feel like again. Ooh, the point stands. Poet of Avon or Poet of Avon. Four cards came out. Poet of Avon, Set, Hathor, and the Traveler. We just saw the Traveler, Keeper of the Crossroads. The Storyteller is the Poet of Avon, whose domains are fame, stagnation, and pride. Set, the Prince of Avarice, whose domains are short sightedness, ambition, and narcissism. Hathor, whose domains are mediation, communication, and culture, sitting as the mistress of harmony. And then again, we see the Traveler, Keeper of the Crossroads, whose domains are restlessness, independence, and appraisal. The danger of Hathor when it comes to the Poet of Avon, Ea, and Set, when it comes to this short-sightedness, ambition, and narcissism meeting stagnation and pride, especially in fame, in order, it's like it's those times where in seeking harmony we choose to appease egos, which ultimately leads to further discord and chaos down the line, because it teaches literally narcissism literally on the card. It teaches us that it's okay, or it teaches us that whoever will continue to bow down or compromise or take the hit. And so, of course, we escalate more and more and more and more and more. It leads to further chaos and disharmony and discord down the line. to take a temporary, momentary peace in the present. If, again, as it resonates when it resonates, because use your discernment. Justice is being measured in many ways and meted out in its own time. Bottom of the deck is Osiris, God King of Duat. Commitment, acquisition, and responsibility. Sometimes you can't make peace with the vengeful or the wrathful or the proud. It's not peace. You can always make peace with the vengeful, the wrathful, and the proud. What peace looks like is going to be different, but you can't all like compromise doesn't always lead to harmony and peace with the vengeful, the wrathful, the proud, the greedy, the whatever, because they're going to want more and more and more. They're going to encroach more and more and more. And when you choose a path of compromise with the hopes of peace, it just teaches them that they can push more and more and more. Again, to like, why do so many people try to make a change after they lose whatever? It's because they didn't think they had to change. If you gave 67 tries and chances, why would they think that there won't be a 68th, a 100th, a millionth? You know? Anyway, last card. It came out. Final card. Please. Just your intuition and discernment will help you navigate forward. All of the extra stuff you don't necessarily have to worry about. Your intuition and discernment will guide you. The secondary effects that are desirable, desired and intended will happen, and it can play out in a way much better than we imagine, think, or like have the capacity to realize when, you know, the energy that oversees everything, past, present, and future, and all of the myriad of possibilities that can exist or spawn because of free will. And then, of course, there are some that is just. I feel like our capacity to surprise the divine definitely exists. It may not necessarily be vast, but it definitely exists. Um, as a function of free will, right? Anyway, it can work out better to the point where hindrances and blockages in the past could become assets and allies in the future. But if we, again, there's what's for us to worry about and what's not for us to worry about. Why do cards keep wanting to fall today? Lilith, Thief of Life, here she is again. Hunger, animalism, and instinct are her domains. And it's, you could say it's the hunger that she inspires in others because they want her. It's the animalism and their primal instinct at their hunger for her, and meanwhile she is just living her life, minding her business. That's how she is coming out today. That's her metaphor today. The bottom of the deck is the Leper King, Sword of Law. Bravery, self-discipline, and faith. This is so interesting because we saw in the Justice, no, not in the Justice card, in the other card that I don't remember. There was the King of a Kingdom and then the City of Women. Was that the Eight of Cups? No. The Nine of Cups? Maybe. It had like a. That was the Lovers. It was the Lovers in the Orisha Tarot. I'm pretty sure it was the Lovers in the Orisha Tarot. It was the Lovers. I'm like 99% sure. There was the king of a kingdom and then the village or the town of women, and he sent the Orishas, not only like his army or whatever, he sent Orishas to go and get these women. Meanwhile, these women are just existing in that city. So to see this leper king sort of law and Lilith being hunger, animalism, and instinct here, it's more so what she inspires in him than anything to do with her. Big ups on the self discipline. Contain yourself, king. Like, girl, come on. You know? Contain yourself. Anyway, to also see the sword of law with this leper king is interesting. Because what law? With whose authority? And under what jurisdiction is this sword wielded? Cool. And it is almost very, because there's, I don't know if it's, I think it's in the Bible. I think it's scripture. But it's like, it's that if you don't praise him, the rocks will praise him type energy. But it's more so if those that are in a position to be used are incapable of being used for any reason, the divine will use others. So, what may have been seen or construed as just or whatever at some point, maybe it stagnated. Again, that was the fame and the pride that led to that stagnation. Someone may have mastered one thing and grown proud in their mastery to the point where they can't. It's just like, when times change. And someone that used to be the best, like they're still stuck in like being the best 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, to the point where like maybe they're not the worst, but they're definitely not the best anymore. And again, with that whole thing of ego from a few lives ago. Okay. I said lives ago, like live streams, but I heard like lives as in like lifetimes, like past lives. Past lives was at the top of the Oshos and Tarot when I pulled it out. Anyway, the thing about the ego from a few live streams ago was again, it was like there's a person with the ego of being the best, and then there's the person that strives to be the best. The person that strives to be the best will continue to grow, will pivot, will share their knowledge, will do everything in the light of the maestro. But the person whose ego of being the best causes them to lose all of their substance, meaning they're not the best anymore because they're still doing exactly what they were doing then. They've stagnated. They just claim to be, hold themselves as if they are, and try to dominate the world around them in a way to make them appear to be. It's only good for so long. Anyway, the creator at the bottom of the deck with projections and suppression under that. Sometimes we don't even see the creator because of suppression and projection. Or we lose sight of the creator because of suppression and rejection. That's the thing about an ever growing, ever changing, ever evolving world. Right? Even the creator has to send somebody every now and then. Or even the creator has to visit every now and then. Right? Okay. Bottom of the deck is playfulness, which is the page. This is so interesting. Not only does this give vibes of ignition from the Elemental Oracle deck, Oh, atoms was like the final card, right? That subatomic. Just for illustrative purposes, I'm not gonna get into this whole other deck. I promise. Oh, oof. I mean, I say that before I even see what the card is in between. It's interesting because it also looks similar to electricity with that whole electromagnetic, right? You can draw certain conclusions if you know what is electrical and what is magnetism when someone says electromagnetic. Here it is. It was more so giving this, bringing this to mind. Fire ignition. I said, I said I wasn't gonna do it. Oh my gosh! I know. I said, but I did say it's bold of me to say that I won't do this before I even see where it is. Because again, that looked. It also looked like electricity. We have rain and storms. The conductor, the maestro, the conductor. Water conducts electricity, but it's like the. It's just like the rain can either douse the fire or conduct electricity. With the storm, it simultaneously does both, right? In the storm, you will see lightning, and when things get wet, they grow more conductive. If a tree or a building is struck by lightning and catches on fire, the same rain from the same storm that created that same fire can also be used or will also in part douse it. So it does both conduct electricity and douse fire. And maybe that's a metaphor for emotion because the cards that came out, we have sorrow, the nine of the mind, aloneness, number nine, major arcana, and the four of rainbows, the miser. Sorrow, aloneness, and the miser. This is almost the energy of um, the ageless in despair over her fate rather than embracing it and being of service. Right. Sometimes this, like the same situation and circumstances that would inspire sorrow, aloneness, and a miserly, miserable attitude, can also inspire another to change and to create change. The emotions can work for or against us. The spiritual can work for or against us. The physical can work for or against us. What's most interesting is, though, this energy of playfulness. What was that fortune? Um, it was the only one that had a fortune in the fortune cookies. It was like fortune three. Um, it was like fun. Usually brings ideas along for the ride, and it was that energy of if someone's in a challenging, seemingly hopeless situation, maybe approaching it as like a fun challenge would inspire one to see potentials or avenues or whatever solution that they wouldn't have seen in this sort of dour, sour energy. Down, dour, and sour. But with that playfulness, it's like there would like the solution may make itself sort of plain. Visually, though, playfulness, trust the creator. Playfulness and trust the creator, literally that energy. Fire, water, fire. It's the page of fire meeting the knight of water that leads to the king of fire, or energies that sit in those spaces. Page of fire awaken the brilliance Herald of Flame. I don't think we actually saw the Herald of Flames, though. I don't think it came out. This playfulness, it seeks, but again, this plays so much into sorrow, aloneness, and whatever that other card was. This is stress, the Seven of Fire. It looks like it attempts to recreate. It looks like stress is an attempt to recreate this playfulness. I need to use the restroom. But this is the final card. I'm going to show you and then I'm going to go. And I don't know, because I'm using third party software now, I don't know. This is in between compromise and existence. Oh my gosh. And again, we just saw with the Thor, after the proud and the stagnant, how compromise can lead to further disharmony, discord, and chaos. And it's under the presence of stress. Like, it's like stress is an attempt at playfulness. But playfulness requires trusting the creator. Or playfulness results from trusting the creator in stressful situations. Stress is in between compromise and existence. Compromising one's existence in this stress. And again, it's like thinking, if I just compromise, if I compromise, if I compromise, eventually, like, things will get better. And the thing, it was, the narcissist was also there. It was on the card. The narcissistic, the proud, the stagnant. There is no amount of compromise that would get an energy like that to make anything better for anyone but themselves. Cool. All right. I hope you all have an amazing whenever you see this. I hope you're acting in alignment to make all that you wish to experience your reality. I hope that whatever you need along your path, and when you find my bladder knows that this live is over. So